So welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Today is the third in our series of webinars for topics for this summer term. So we had one on relationships, we've had one on puberty, and today we're looking really specifically at human reproduction, why we teach it in primary and how we're delivering that in Jigsaw 3 to 11. My name is Sarah Bruff. I'm the programme lead for Jigsaw 3 to 11, so hopefully I can answer lots of your questions if there are any. If not now, you are always welcome to email and get in touch, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. But what we're going to do today, we're going to look at why we include human reproduction in our primary curriculum. We're going to look a little bit about the law across the UK, look specifically at where the sex education lessons are and what's in them as far as possible. So you're then confident to go back and really look at those in detail in the context of your school. And then a little bit about practical teaching strategies and sensitive questions as well. So I know we didn't cover very much of that in the previous two, so we're going to do a little bit more on that today. Right, so why do we teach human reproduction in primary school? We really need to start from that. And if we're going to be teaching it, we need to be aware of that as teachers in the classroom about why we're doing what the purpose of this is. Well, we very much believe that children deserve accurate, as it says, age-appropriate information. Children in school are aware of life cycles. They are in families. They're seeing families on the playground. They know about babies and babies in mothers' tummies. They're seeing these things, and they're also aware, as in the puberty work, about the changes that are happening to their bodies. And especially as they approach upper primary, they're more aware about how these things may be linked. So one of the things that we can do by teaching sex education in the primary school is we can find a really nice way, a safe way to start opening those conversations. Children can start to understand that there are times and places that they can ask these questions. We're going to be giving them some of the language that they need to do that, to practice using that language, understand who they can talk to in school, and also through this, we're talking about who they can talk to out of school in their families as well if they've got further questions. So we can really support that whole community approach to supporting children's learning about the wonder of that life cycle a little bit further. We also know that children, that they're curious, they've got lots of curiosity, and nobody's answering those questions. They may well turn to unreliable sources. So we want to counter that. We want to help embed that positive approach to asking questions and to signpost them about where to go for that information. And we'll look at, in a minute, we'll talk about some of the other information that might be coming through that we want to avoid. We also know there's research, collections of research coming out. You may have seen the DFE's, I think it's 2024 guidance on teaching sex education to prevent sexual harassment, for example. That there's which draws together lots of evidence. We know that this knowledge can help protect children. And again, if they understand their body, so the puberty work and the sex education together, they're more able to recognize when something is wrong and know when to seek support and have the confidence and the language to do that as well. And so from that knowledge, we've got statutory recommendations that also, so we can feel confident that across the UK, the recommendations to include sex education primary comes from that place, from that research. And that's why one reason we want to include it at primary. So we've got that background. We also know that children and young people are saying that actually that they want to start having sex education in primary schools. One good example is Sex Education Forum's RSE poll for 2024. This one had a really specific question about RSE starting earlier in life. Now, of course, RSE includes the relationships aspect as well. So that 39% of respondents saying that they think it would have been better starting earlier includes relationships. But when you dig into some of the comments that young people are coming out with, they are referring to sex education as well. So in the blue box there, one example, a young person saying they would have felt more prepared and less sheltered, and they had to find out from peers. Our primary children, after year 5 and 6, most of them are going on to secondary school, where they may know a little bit, but not enough, and giving them the confidence of some age appropriate conversations, some age appropriate vocabulary and knowledge that they can take forward can be really helpful for them. And again, children and young people are telling us that they know people are going online and finding information from unreliable sources, and they don't actually want to do that. So we're hearing it from children as well. I want to keep a really positive approach to everything that we do, but we know that there is some real safeguarding protection issues that come with some of our content in PSHE, and sex education is definitely no exception to this. So when you look at things like the Children's Commission report, this is for England, the report on children pornography from last year um, is really drew out that pornography is a way that some children, young people are finding out about sex for the first time, and that is definitely not what we are wanting for our young people. So some children might be seeking out the information in adolescence. They maybe where they think they're going to find reliable information, but also a lot of children are. The evidence is showing they're just finding it by accident at very young ages. So although the average age they may first see this is 13, which is still not far from primary school, this figure, more than a quarter of respondents had seen online pornography by the age of 11. That's a high number. So, we want to make our PSHE to set a positive course for discussions about sex within relationships. But by teaching children these facts about human reproduction, we give them time to gently build their knowledge and support them to feel comfortable and to ask questions, so that if they do stumble across this information, they feel in a better position to question it, to have some critical thinking, and know who they can go and talk to for reliable information. So I think that's a really important part of what we're doing. What does our guidance say? I'm not going to go through it in a lot of detail, but in England, the latest guidance is that we teach sex education. It's recommended that it is taught in year 5 and year 6, looking about content about, it talks about sex education being content about conception and birth, part which is mirroring basically what's part of the national curriculum for science. But of course, in sex and relationships education, the RSHE, we're looking at it as that slightly more holistic in the context of relationships as well. But it's also really clear that parents need to be involved in be consulted about what's being taught and should be aware. And also, if you are teaching sex education in primary school, though it's non-statutory, it's recommended. We're going to need to offer support as well to parents about how to talk to their children about it and how to link that with what's being taught in school, as well as being clear about their right to request that their child is withdrawn if they choose to. And we'll come to that in a little bit. This is closely mirrored in Northern Ireland and Scotland. So in Scotland, there is a specific statement about describing how human life begins and how a baby is born. And in Northern Ireland, again, knowing how babies are conceived, grow, and are born. So you can see this is really similar. The language may be different, but the intent is the same. And although they have specific standards, as I said, I'm going to come to a minute, there is a right to withdraw from those aspects. In Wales, again, very similar language about reproductive organs and development, and the process of reproduction is really clearly there, but it is mandatory in Wales, which means there is no right to withdraw. Let's just recap on that bit, because I know we get lots of questions. And again, please do get in touch with us. So where does the parental right to withdraw children from sex education apply? In primary schools in England, there is no right to withdraw from any relationships education, any health education, so nothing with families, the life cycles, puberty, body safety, all of that, there is no right to withdraw. So, but you are recommended to teach sex education. You still don't have to, but it's recommended, and parents have a legal right to withdraw from the sex ed in RSHE. If you are teaching about human reproduction in science, parents do not have a right to withdraw from that side of the curriculum. But your policy has to make all your approach really clear to parents and carers. So in Scotland, in Wales, as I said, there is no right to withdraw from any of the RSE curriculum. But in Scotland and Northern Ireland, there's specific sex education. There is a premise there in the guidance that parents can withdraw. Why does this make it a little bit complicated? It's a very, very small number of parents who do choose to withdraw their children, but that is absolutely their right to do so. But in order to be clear about that, first thing is you have to have a clear definition and understanding of what sex education is so that you can talk about that clearly. In Jigsaw, we define it as the learning about human reproduction with the sexual intercourse, conception, and the stages of pregnancy and birth. And of course, we include around that the emotional impact of having a baby as well as the physical facts. So that's how we understand it. And you are welcome to obviously to take that and use that as a basis of your own statement. But it's really important that you are clear about that so that you can talk about it. So I just want you to think, do you know now, those of you that are watching this live or watching it on recording, does your policy set out what is sex education in your school? First question. Do you know off the top of your head? Do you know what it says? Do you know what that definition is? And does it need reviewing? It's really important that everyone who is involved in the teaching knows that. You need to know enough that if a parent comes up to you and says, well, which of the lessons, what do you teach about sex education? Which lessons can we withdraw our children from? You need to be able to answer that really confidently. So it's just something to really take away and think about. Okay, so where is the sex education in our Jigsaw primary program? We've got just 2 lessons with that understanding from Jigsaw of what sex education is. We used to have it in year 4, but in line with the current guidance, the updated guidance for England, we've moved it to year 5 and year 6. And so there's 1 lesson in year 5 on conception, and then 1 in year 6 on conception to birth. So it builds on what's in year 5, but it's set in that wider context of puberty, of changing me, of life cycles, of families and relationships. And that's really, really key. All of that guidance quite rightly makes it clear that you need to set it in this wider context. You can't just pick it up and just teach it totally out of the blue. So you will see those lessons really clearly. When you look across, I've literally just taken screenshots from the pages. 1 is called conception, 1 is called conception to birth. So it's very easy to see where that conception content is taught. What's actually in the lessons? So some of you may be familiar with it from previous years. Some of you may want to know what's changed. We've kept very closely to what's been there before. So in year 5, we're looking at different relationships and the considerations people might have before having a baby. So again, we're setting this in relationships. We look at conception, so fertilization of an egg by sperm through sexual intercourse, and also putting that in the context between consenting adults, so the age of consent comes in. Pregnancy as a result of this. We also look at fertility treatment for those who need extra support for pregnancy to take place, and contraception is gently introduced as well. As always, you can make changes to this content. We'll look at that in a minute. With that, there's a range of resources as well. So you can have a look at the resources, the printable resources, and decide which activities you want to do. You may decide you don't want to do all of them. You may want to decide you want to adapt them. As always, we don't have that much on the screen, on the slides, although again, you can take what's on the slide and put your own images up if you prefer. But that is exactly so that you can make those adaptations more easily. And we've got the animations as well. And we really recommend that through whole of Changing Me, you've got a post box. So in year 5, we Jigsaw Jez's post box for children's anonymous questions. I know time is scarce, but as we approach the end of the summer term, we do recommend, if possible, that you spend a little bit longer on this lesson. There's quite a lot for children to take in. But again, you can adapt that content as you wish to. If you don't want to spend a bit longer, we would recommend 90 minutes if possible. So when you go in to look at the lesson, as I said, it's piece 4 for year 5, conception. That little bit on the left is just showing how it's set within all of those topics for Changing Me. And you'll see on our snapshot documents that the 2 sex education lessons in Jigsaw PSHE 3 to 11 are in italics. So I'm just going to read the learning intentions for this age group. We're looking at, I understand that sexual intercourse can lead to conception, and this is how babies are usually made. Following on from that, I understand that sometimes people need help from doctors to have a baby. And then that social and emotional learning, which is so important as well. I appreciate how amazing it is that human bodies can reproduce in these ways, because it's fantastic. There's a lot of awe, wonder that comes into this. We don't want to lose that. So that's kind of our starting point for what we're looking for in this lesson. So we start off with a connectus activity, looking at a range of relationships. So we're straight away setting this within different types of relationships that we have. And then we go into a Diamond 9 activity. Again, so then we're setting this idea of having children, of reproduction in an adult context, part of our life cycles. And we spend some time discussing this before we move on to Tell Me, Show Me. Remember, all those ask me this questions, they're all adaptable. They're different ideas of things that you could use to assess where children are in their learning, what they might like to find out more about. So you can pick and choose what you use out of that as you wish to. We then move on to look at what we mean by conception, what it means. And we recommend that we'll just have I'll just come on to the animations in a minute, but we recommend that you use the animations to support you with this as well. So it's recapping a little bit on the male and female reproductive system, and explaining that pregnancy starts inside a woman when a sperm meets an egg in one of her fallopian tubes. And we're setting this in part of a loving and private adult relationship. So this is a really important part that may make it feel different to just a purely scientific approach, although I'm sure your science is respectful of that as well. We then have a definition that you can use or you can adapt. Again, it's in the teacher notes, it's not on the screen, about what sexual intercourse is. And we introduce the idea of consent. So that's a really important aspect to have here as well. And then who might need help to get pregnant. So, we know that there are different ways that people can become pregnant for different reasons. So we allow some space to explore that in the classroom as well, and make it clear that all are equally valuable. Then again, so we've got some images that come out that we bring out from the animations, and we look at what might happen then when a woman becomes pregnant. We don't look in detail at pregnancy in year 5. We mention it top level. We say, that the pregnancy starts, and there's a little bit of the images, but these are revisited in year 6. So our animations are, for those of you who haven't seen them, they are animated diagrams. We don't build them straight into the lessons because we don't know which versions you want to use. But there are links from the lessons, from the teacher notes, and within right at the top of the lesson in the class teacher prep sheets, there's lots of links to the community area to where these are. So it's so that you make sure you check with your school policy whether you are using them and which ones you are using. And you'll see here, you select from the age 9 to 11 section is where the sex education is. And then you can see that blue text, which is really reminding you that this is sex education. So if you, especially important if you if you've got the right to withdraw. You will see a description of what is in that. So for the female body one, shows sperm traveling from the vagina to the ovum and the implantation in the lining of the womb. So that's the female aspect. And then the male animation shows something slightly different. It's a full animation. It shows an erection, it shows intercourse, and it shows ejaculation. So you're going to need to have a look at those and decide if those are something that you want to show in your classroom. When you click onto it a little bit further, I've tried to catch a picture of it showing the difference between, for example, animation C and D here. So there are 2 versions of each. One has narrative text. It's not read out loud, it's just subtitles, which puts the words in that you can use to read out. Obviously, you can pause the video, so you can see there on the left that where it shows this is where pregnancy begins. I've taken a screenshot of that. And then the other version is exactly the same images, but there's no narrative text, which means that you are absolutely able to change the wording and the vocabulary you use in line with your school policy as well. So again, the same for the male one. I tried to pick out the very short part, which shows intercourse on in the male one, and it shows the penis in the vagina. It doesn't show very much more than that, and then it shows ejaculation and it shows the sperm traveling. So, but again, the first one has the narrative text and the second one doesn't. Really good example here. So it's got the text here. If a man and woman have unprotected sex at this time. So if you decide you do want to include a very top line explanation of contraception, and we've got some words to explain that, you can use it. But if you think, actually, we're not going to go there, use the one without the narrative text and you can talk over the top. So we try and sort of lay that out as clearly as possible for you so you can decide what to use. We've then got, and then the lesson moves on to the Tell Me, Show Me, where children are in working groups and they've got the truth about conception and pregnancy cards. So they read them, decide what's true or false. And what we're doing through all of these activities is we're giving children the vocabulary to talk about this, so they can practice talking about these about sex, sexual intercourse as part of their wider learning and changing me, as practicing the language, they're practicing the vocabulary, they're practicing being comfortable with it in a structured way that supports their learning and helps to build their skills. So the resources, again, so those are your the activity from the beginning where they're looking at different relationships for Connect Us. You've got the Diamond 9 about what a couple might consider before deciding to have a child, and then you've got that Truth About Conception and Pregnancy activity as well. So year 6 very much builds on this. We look at how a baby develops in the womb, what the baby can and can't do. We revisit conception, we revisit sexual intercourse, revisit the same animations. There aren't new ones, it's revisiting that learning. We look at the stages of labour and birth, and we include vaginal and C-section as well. And again, looking at that emotions that it might bring. Again, so a couple of different resources. Again, if you can spend more time on this lesson, we would recommend it, but you can decide how much or how little you want to do from these different activities. There are quite a few activities there. So about what baby can do in the womb. There's a closed procedure activity, and I'll show you those in a minute. And we have suggested some optional external videos. The National Geographic one is lovely for looking at the wonder of childbirth and the universality of it around the world. So again, do have a look at those, but you may have other things you want to include. And again, we recommend you can use a post box. So again, really clearly indicated, conception to birth, and the learning intentions, I can describe how a baby develops from conception through the 9 months of pregnancy and how it is born. And I recognize how I feel when I reflect on the development and birth of a baby. Got some key vocabulary for you as always. We start with the Connect Us, thinking about, again, we're going back to thinking about life cycles. What can we remember from our lives? Linking to children's experience, there's a picture of a scan, a baby in the womb, which we know that children may well have seen from friends and family in their community. And then we look at development of the baby in a womb and how we can't remember what's happened before we were born, but it's that commonality, the wonder of life as well. So, and then we've got the baby can game, where children can decide, what they think, what they could and couldn't do when they were a baby in the womb. We revisit conception. We recommend you go back to the animations if you use them before, or maybe you don't use them in year 5 and you choose to use them in year 6. And so we talk about that, and then we move on to childbirth. And the way that the childbirth activity is set up is it's a close activity. So there's a text, and children have to decide which words go in where. Now you could do this as a whole class together to talk through the process, but for some children, they may find it more comfortable doing this in small groups. But either way, we encourage working together. Children get to talk about sexual intercourse and childbirth and pregnancy, and practice using that language. So you can see there are lots of different activities as well. And then there are other ideas of activities that you can use as well. So to look at those resources, you've got the what can I do when I was a baby? We've got that close activity with the words at the end for children to put in. And there's also an alternative of children drawing that journey from conception to birth as well. Just on the thing of sex ed and not sex ed, just remember as well, at the end of this unit, we've got our pupil knowledge organisers that can help you to draw that together. If your school's chosen not to deliver sex ed, there is a version of it without sex education on it. So that's just I wasn't quite sure where to put that, so I've put it in there. So that's the main content. Where it comes to strategies for teaching about sex education, use what we've done is we've got, this is used by a lot of schools. We get really positive feedback about it. So, but again, any feedback is always welcome, but check those notes so that you can see where you want to make adaptations for your school. This will really help you feel ready and confident, and check that against your policy. We talked about just knowing what the definition of sex education is. If you've got other adults in your classroom, are they aware of that content and approach as well? That's really, really important, so that you can be confident in discussions, that you're able to support children fully without making children feel awkward. Because sometimes when you hesitate, that can then make children feel that maybe they've asked something they shouldn't have asked. Do check double check to see if any children have been withdrawn and make sure that arrangements are made for them to access learning elsewhere. And think about the questions you may get in advance. So using a post box can be really, really helpful for that. And let parents know what you're teaching. I'll come back to that in just a sec. Um, so that's one aspect of preparing, is looking in advance. But just remember as well that your consistent approach to PSHE is supporting all children with these types of topics. That lesson structure, the distancing of activities, the language, like what might someone feel in this situation, not what might you feel. All of those things that we build in to help you support that language. And the Jigsaw Charter. And again, a reminder, especially in year 5 and 6, we've actually got an adapted Jigsaw Charter in these lessons. So you can talk, really revisit and say, do we need to add some extra rules about the correct names of body parts? And it's okay if we don't know. And those bits are there as well. But if you do get unexpected questions, there's a couple of 4 key things to really remember. You can pause before responding, and that doesn't mean you have to just stand and say nothing. But you don't have to answer the question immediately. You can absolutely acknowledge it. You can use the post box. Let's put that question in the post box. I can give time to it and give it a proper answer. And I'm not sure. I'll come back to you and answer that question. We don't worry about instantly answering everything we don't know in other subjects, but for some reason we seem to worry about it more when it comes to some of these more sensitive topics. So just give yourself a break on that. And the post box, let's normalize some anonymous questions because they can be really helpful to children. But they give you time to prepare a response, but they also really useful for helping to assess where children are before you start a topic and after you've taught it. What questions have come in before you've taught it that you might want to address? What myths and misconceptions are there? What are children still asking questions about now? So make sure you visit before each lesson. Staying neutral and factual is really important. Just thinking about what actually is the question they're asking rather than all of the other things that you know about that might be coming into your head, and use that jigsaw chart to help. Just like, do you remember we use the correct names of body parts? Do you remember we don't ask, we're respecting confidentiality. We're not asking personal questions, and just staying really calm is really helpful. But there will be questions that aren't appropriate. It might be just because they're not really relevant to what you're teaching. They may be more relevant to secondary. So we can redirect to family, but do it. Make sure when we're doing it in a way that makes sure to make children feel they shouldn't have asked the question, because we want to encourage that asking of questions. When it comes to parental engagement, again, check your policy. I know I keep saying it, but it really does make a difference. We would hope that you are informing parents of changing me content as well as all of the other content as you go along. We've got some parent carer materials that can help you with that. And you can signpost if you're using the parent portal, signpost parents to it and say, but these are the changes that we're making. Let parents know what changes you're making and say, but you can come in and talk to us, let them know who they can talk to and how to do that if they've got further questions. And if parents do choose to withdraw their children from sex education, if you are in England, Scotland or Northern Ireland, it's absolutely their parental right to do that. So the good practice is to invite them in and just double check that they understand what the content is, and maybe confirm it in writing might be helpful. And make sure that when you arrange that alternative provision, that child doesn't feel uncomfortable, that they don't feel singled out in any way. As I said, certainly in England, there's an expectation for teaching sex education that you are supporting children with supporting parents with how to talk to their children about sex education. So we have got an updated leaflet about that. So there's one which is just about puberty, but we've also got a version which includes sex education that you can download from the parent carer section. Our parent teacher knowledge organisers are useful for you as a teacher. That's why they're teacher knowledge organisers as well. But you will see as well that the second page now is full of questions relevant to each puzzle unit, including sex education. So you can use that to help support parents with questions they might want to ask, and you make adaptations. There are editable versions, so you can add your own links and support if you want to. So just remember, your sex education is a really small part of that much broader content in Changing Me. And only 2 lessons, if you're in a country with the right to withdraw, we feel carry that, but check it against your policy and your country-specific guidance. We know young people want this. So it's a really positive thing that we can help support young people learn about sex education. And you've got your charter, you've got your ground rules, you've got your resources, and you can adapt them to help support your pupils. But do make sure that you're really open with what's going on. So I'm going to stop there. You've said there's a lot for you to still go and look at, even though it's just 2 lessons. But are there any questions that have come up, Ruth, in the chat?
No questions.